Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, the show about building a healthier relationship with modern technology. Now, here are your hosts, R. Blank and Stephanie Warner.
Michelle Brigman's professional life has been dedicated to helping companies like Dell, Citibank, 7-Eleven, and Medallia build strong loyalty with customers, clients, partners, and employees. She is a transformational development speaker and coach who shows professional women how to navigate the personal challenges that keep them from being happy, balanced, and fulfilled. She's also the co-host of the Hard-Won Wisdom podcast, sharing her message and empowering executive women to find harmony while living their best lives. Excited to chat with her today. Welcome, Michelle, to the Healthier Tech Podcast.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm really excited to be here.
It's great having you. So just to get us started, from what I know about you, that for lack of a better way of saying it, burnout is a big part of your story. Can you talk a little bit more about your prior career and what led to burnout?
Absolutely. Well, and I still work in corporate because I love it. I love what I do and I love the industry I'm in. But really, I just hit this sort of period of chronic stress and fatigue. And what happened is I just found I never felt good. I'd go to the doctor. Everybody would say, Michelle, you're healthy, because I did all the right things. If you looked at my habits and routines, I exercised, I ate right. But the challenge was I didn't feel good. And so it was through this whole sort of exploration to figure out what's going on with me. I honestly decided that I am really good at tackling complicated problems at work. I'm doing it for these large companies. And why don't I actually treat myself as the project and apply some of those skills? So it just sent me on sort of this whole discovery around health and wellness, only to discover that 99% of the problems and the symptoms I had were actually based on my own lifestyle choices.
I really like that, treating yourself as the project. That's a really great framing. So what are some of those choices that you're talking about there?
Well, absolutely. Well, first of all, it was a matter of, I think, it's particularly with women, and women, I'll say that I'm going to speak to more of my demographic where we're further in our career. We end up at this crossroads, right? Where we don't have a whole lot of friends. We don't feel very good. We start weighing kind of our trade-offs. Maybe our relationships are fractured and we're just not very fulfilled at work. And it shows up to where we're flat out exhausted and we're not showing up with our A game. And it was just, and as I started talking about how I was feeling, it had to be done in the corners and the quiet, in confidence, because you didn't want to show the cracks. And what I found is, as I started talking about the way I was feeling, leading me through investing in getting a coaching certification with Institute of Integrative Nutrition, I started kind of talking about what I was learning because I was feeling better. I was letting go of some of the responsibilities of being always on. I was taking out some of the things in my life that were, frankly, weighing me down. So as an example, it may be that I never took a break at work. We live, particularly now, even after COVID, I know many of us, you're like in these back-to-back meetings and you never detach, right? So learning that by building in breaks to get away, unplug, take a walk outside, journal, call a friend, like there's something else that you can do in order to just sort of calm down and find sort of that peace and balance that you were missing. Breathing techniques, those are another great exercise. So it just showed up where you're just in this constant on state and you don't stop.
Stop being constantly on. And so that is that part of what you would define as because a lot of people use this term work-life balance. You hear it all the time. And oftentimes when it's said, it's just sort of assumed that you know what they're talking about, like what a work-life balance is. The items you just listed off, do those factor into what you consider to be a work-life balance?
Yes, I think that, I love the term work-life balance, but I think it means something different for everybody. So I think that one of the exercises that we'll do as I've gone through my own journey and as I'm talking to a client, right, is let's evaluate everything. And I'm going to take this back and apply it to business, because if we're tackling a big problem, right, one of the first things that you do is you figure out, where am I? And that is a tactic that most people never stop, particularly women aren't stopping to figure out where they are. So we're looking at things around, what's my level of happiness with my job? What about my health? Am I happy with how I'm moving my body? Am I happy with where I'm at from a spiritual perspective? Am I creative? And by looking at everything, and you understand, number one, where they sit, and then what's out of, like I say, out of balance. And not everything is always important, because life isn't always going to be this perfect circle where everything's always, the scale's always balanced, but sometimes things are more important than they are at other times. So just as an example, I found that I was constantly arguing with my husband. And if I were talking to my friends, I would talk about, okay, here's all the things that were happening at home. I was frustrated because, he wasn't doing the dishes, whatever. I was just frustrated. Well, when I stopped and went through the exercise of really looking at all of these places in my life, what I found is I was really exhausted at work. We were in the middle of a big transformation. We were working a lot of hours. I was burnt out. And where I was bringing it and where it was showing up was I was arguing with my husband all the time.
So you took it
Right?
out on those closest to you.
Yes, but I was complaining about the symptom, right? The outcome, and not looking at root cause. And I think that right there is where there's this big gap in how, and I target women, but it's men as well. We're giving so much and we're running and we're reacting to whatever's being thrown at us, that we aren't stopping to just go, wait a second, what's really going on? And let's start unpacking that to figure out where things are causing me dissatisfaction, thus out of balance.
As you know, this is the Healthier Tech podcast. And as you were going through that list of activities that you intentionally sought out, right? Building in breaks, unplugging, there was a word you verbatim used, taking a walk outside, journaling. It struck me that those were all tech-free activities. And so what was that intentional, or is that just what happened when you decided to look for activities to help break? Like, why do you think those all ended up being tech-free activities?
Because I think the change is you're going inward instead of outward. And when you go inward, you let go of the technology is not a part of that, because it is noise distracting you from hearing the cues that your body is sending you through maybe a physical, maybe it shows up physically, something's hurting. Maybe you're hurting emotionally. Maybe there's something going on mentally. You are blocking that communication where you reconnect. So that's why it's so important to set those things down, walk away, really find whatever environment that you most feel at, I'll say connected or in tune with yourself. Mine happens to be outside. You can send me on a walk, and fortunately I live near trails. It changes my outlook about everything. So whatever your special place is.
So when clients find you, do they already know that they want a better work-life balance, or are they seeking self-improvement and you help them realize that work-life balance is part of that? What is the problem that people are trying to solve when they come to you?
They're feeling very unfulfilled. I always say what happens is these women can say, my bank account looks pretty good. It's pretty full. My life is very empty. And they aren't sure what's causing it. So by spending time really sitting down, and if I kind of walk through the steps we go through, is, like I just said, evaluating, let's talk about all of these areas. Where are you right now? That first step, the reality is they haven't done it. So just giving them space and trust and permission to sort of reflect on what is happening with them is a gift in itself. And then from there, starting to really spend time talking about, okay, let's figure out and visualize what you actually want, not what you think you're supposed to want, not answering the question about, you're still living for your parent. These women may be 45 years old, but yet their goals still sound like what their parents told them they needed to do at 25. Right? What do you actually want and what brings you joy, and really unpacking that. And what it tends to be are feelings and not things.
You step back to that initial question you put in your list, right? Where am I? That seems to me, and I'm hoping you can educate me on this, that seems to me to be one of those deceptively simple questions. Like, it sounds like, where am I? Oh, that's easy. And then you realize, how do you help people even begin to answer that question?
A lot of times we just step back and just say, what is it you love doing? What brings you joy? And I mean, let me ask you that. What's something you love doing, R?
Well, like I said already, walking on the beach. I love spending time in my backyard. I love writing. I really enjoy, I don't know, love, but I really enjoy, getting the chance to speak with people like you on this podcast. So these are things that I love doing.
That's awesome. And if I asked you, do you do them enough?
I am doing them a lot more now than I was. So on the process of continual improvement, I'd
Mhm.
say I've made some really good progress. I don't know if I'd ever do it enough until I get to be retired, and I
Mhm.
don't know when that's going to be.
Sure. Sure. But you're a great example of, just in your story, saying that you're doing more of it now.
Mhm.
And but most of the people that I'm talking to, they're not doing those things. They have the dreams of, I've always wanted to write the book. I really love being at the beach, but it's been 3 years since I've gone. I really enjoy it whenever I can visit art galleries, right? And these are the things they're not doing, because why? Because they're too busy. And by setting down and saying, okay, here's your three things, right? Here are the three things you want more of. Instead of talking about what you have to give up, which becomes a distraction, and you can tell yourself 1,000 reasons why you shouldn't give these things up because of an obligation to someone else. You feel, some responsibility. But when you say, okay, how can you get more time at the beach? Let's figure out a plan to get you to the beach, because that brings you joy, and focus on what will that take. Now, suddenly they're chasing something they actually want to do. And it's funny, by articulating it and then starting to put it out there as a goal, suddenly they start making space for it. And it's not a trade-off. So it's like, it's the shift of bringing in the things you want in your life, and setting a focus, instead of focusing on the things that you're trying to let go of, or you think you should let go of.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like you're advocating, really listening to yourself and asking yourself what's important. And one of the things that I honed in on when you were describing your process is the question, what brings you joy? For me, I remember being asked that question a few years ago and having this moment of panic because I didn't know. I was so focused on the other things, we're always, women, men, anyone professionally, we're always working on what's the next thing, our next project, and getting to that place of even understanding that that's a question I should be able to answer was really striking. Have you found that that is that some of the people that you talk to have the same kind of epiphany of I'm not really sure what brings me joy.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the misconceptions is it has to be something huge and monumental in your life.
Right.
And whenever you start talking about, all right, tell me about, we'll say maybe spending time with family. Well, someone may then realize, you know what? I feel really happy whenever my whole family sits down for dinner together, because we never do that. That moment where I'm cooking and maybe my spouse comes in to help me, and then we all sit down and enjoy a meal together, that is joy. Okay. So again, now we start figuring out, all right, if this is something really important, how can we bring your family in to participate in that?
I
Or
love that. I love yeah, I love that it can be something that is not monumental, but making that shift of recognizing and then making space for it has a monumental impact on your life.
monumental, because then again, you sort of release yourself from the argument of time. You release yourself from the argument of commitments to everybody else. And you find that these are simple things that you can actually bring in and you can sustain them over time. And even if you aren't
Absolutely.
doing them set, if you're not having dinner together as a family 7 nights a week, but you are now doing it once a week, that's one more time, 52 more times this year than you would have done otherwise. It is a positive change that you can feel proud of, and it brings you, again, it's feeding that what's missing.
So yeah, I really like where this conversation has gone, and so far, achieving more joy and more fulfillment through less use of technology. I note that you also work as a STEM instructor at Women in IT, right? Inspiring girls to pursue careers in technology and other STEM fields. And I don't know if you know, I actually was a software engineer
Mhm.
for about 20 years, and I taught at USC Engineering School. And so, to me, STEM, particularly STEM for women, well, it's just a really important initiative. That is something in general. Children need that type of education, and also in general, that whole field could be a little bit less male dominated than
Yes.
it is. So, how does how does that relate to, right? Because so much of what we talked about in terms of improving and increasing your joy is by decreasing the use of technology. How do you help the girls that you teach understand what a healthy relationship with technology means?
Well, a lot of it comes down to, and so true, the fact that there just aren't enough. A lot of it comes down to, again, having conversations with them about, again, what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? And they know, I mean, it may be, let's say it's fashion. I may speak to a young girl who is very interested in fashion. And we talk about, how technology and being comfortable using technology to do design work, or to market and bring a product to market, or to manage, you know, supply chain, right? How does the technology play in that, to sort of recognize that it's not one or the other, it's they both exist. So be comfortable and confident, because technology is going to help you do that creative design work even better. Um, I'll
Yeah,
stop there
no,
for a
yeah,
second.
no, no. And so what I hear between both sides of that, right, using less technology and using more technology, the words that popped into my head, and please correct me if I'm off base, but it's a goal-oriented empowerment process.
Always.
That, and I really, and technology, both more technology and less technology plays into that, and it's about being intentional and focused on your goal and realizing that you're the one actually in control of these decisions.
Yes. And I think, even just to build on that, recognizing that when you're using technology to um, shield or distract you from an emotion, like as in a crutch, because I'm sad, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm depressed, I'm lonely, recognizing that is what you want to break. Technology is fantastic in improving, right, enabling life, enabling you to do better things, connect you with people, explore creativity. But when it becomes your place to zone out, and you're abusing that, and you're keeping yourself from growing and evolving and being curious and exploring something in a more non-tech way, that's where it begins to hurt. And those are the things, I think, that just understanding and being mindful of how and why and when you use technology is very liberating and empowering for those girls, as well as just all of us.
Sorry. I love that. And one thing that that for myself, when I'm using tech, I'm always trying to be really aware of how it makes me feel. So in that I use as an indicator as to, is this good? Is this something that's helping me, or is this something that's making me feel not so good? So I don't really have a question. It was just a thought that bubbled up when you were talking about the, useful uses of tech.
Yeah. Well, I have a 15-year-old daughter. So I have a 23-year-old
Mm,
son and I have a 15-year-old daughter. And obviously technology is it's consumed, it's involved in everything that they do, right? But it's very different in how they use it. And I really have to pay attention, particularly to my daughter, because there is so much of this, the self-image, right? Self-image being influenced by what people are posting in Instagram. I mean, it's awful in terms of the fact that these girls, particularly because that's who I'm around as her group, they are hurting with confidence. They are unsure, am I good enough? They're comparing themselves to everybody. And we talk about this a lot. And Stephanie, I certainly am not going to say we have it all figured out in my house, because we don't. But it is a conversation that we are having about, well, why do you think that is? What do you think is happening in their life? Or let's pull up somebody that's really famous that you're following, and let's look at some of the other things that are going on in their life. And while we can talk about it and they see it, it is a struggle every single day. And I wish I had the answers on that one. I think we're all kind of learning how do you manage that in a healthy way.
because you are a parent, I think it's really important that you're opening the dialogue. I think that's really the best way to
Mhm.
deal with the self-image aspect of like social media, because if you're not talking about it, they're who knows what they're developing as far as image association. You have an opportunity by having the dialogue to influence and balance out the thinking. So I think that's a really great approach.
Or you just discount their feelings, like, oh, but like you can't do that either, right? You have to make it okay to talk
Exactly.
about. And when they tell you I'm feeling really self-conscious, or they're upset and crying, or I need a different brand, my hair's not right, like being able to just really dig down, because I'll go back to the point earlier, that is showing up here, but there's something else they're hurting from. And being able to explore that, and again, being open and listening, which I'll have like I had a conversation with my daughter this week. And after we finished and she had kind of moved on, I said, okay, did I do a good job of listening on that one? Because I was really trying. And she's like, oh yeah, because I
Right.
jump into problem solve mode. And I'm like, I'm working on
Right.
it. So let me know. Am I doing better at this? And she was like, yeah, you got an A on that one.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. But those sorts of conversations are just great. And, I think you're absolutely spot on that you have to create that space where it's okay to talk about it, especially when we're talking about social media and how it makes somebody feel, and not discounting feelings. I think
Right.
that's a key piece of critical advice, I think.
Right.
So you host the Hard Won Wisdom podcast, which I've listened to. I was actually just before this listening to the episode with I think it was Maureen McGurl,
Mhm.
um, and it's a great show. How has that show helped you spread your message of living a balanced life?
I love this. So this has been a love project, very much so. So I have to share my co-host, Fawn Germer. She and I met nearly 20 years ago because she was an upset customer that was escalated to me when I worked at Dell. And she's an accomplished author, speaker, and we just hit it off and always kept in touch. And so anyway, we launched this particular podcast, and it focuses on truly just trailblazing women, whether they're from corporate. Most of them are corporate, but they're doing something amazing in life. So definitely check it out. But how it's helped is the fact that a lot of these women that we've had on as guests, they are at a point in their life where, again, they're really being honest about the struggle. So I mentioned earlier, a lot of these executive women have made a lot of sacrifices. And so but you don't feel like you can talk about it when you're in the middle of the trenches, because there is a certain image and a message that you want to convey to other women in business. And they are kind of stripping it down, and we get really raw about what were some of the trade-offs? How do you juggle? What did you learn? How to make better decisions? So for someone who is coming up in their journey, they are learning from that hard-won wisdom so that things are easier and they're making better decisions for themselves. And everything just maps back to building confidence, having a strong voice, creating your boundaries, and making better decisions that aren't always putting you last, but the importance of just putting yourself first so you can be better for your team, your family, your friends.
As we approach the end of this episode, I like giving our guests a chance to share a specific and actionable, and a single specific and actionable piece of advice for our listeners. And in your case, I would ask for them to begin a journey to a healthier lifestyle.
So great. And I think that the number one thing they could do is give themselves some permission to explore what they enjoy doing, because you probably haven't focused on you. You're doing things for everybody else. You're involved in things because it's meaningful to your kids, to your coworkers, to obligations. But give yourself some permission to go and think back around, what are things I used to enjoy doing that I don't anymore? And try them out again. Make a commitment that you're going to do that thing in the next 2 weeks, if you can do it. But set a time, let's say this, set a SMART goal, right? Make a point that you're going to do it and see if it still fits. And if it doesn't, start trying something else. But the point is, take the time to, as we said earlier, just quiet down and listen and reconnect with what makes you happy, because there are so many ways for you to bring a lot more joy in without feeling like you have to walk away from your job, your family, your life in order to reclaim yourself.
So, Michelle, this has been a fantastic chat. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. For everyone out there, the name again of the podcast is Hard-Won Wisdom. And Michelle, where would you like listeners, other than that, to connect with you?
So I'm most active actually on LinkedIn. That's where most of my activity clients are. And I'll talk about that, as well as health and wellness and just corporate life.
Excellent. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And I actually just followed you on LinkedIn this afternoon. So
cool.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to join us on the Healthier Tech Podcast. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthier Tech Podcast. Remember to check the show notes for all the links and resources mentioned in the show. Please like and subscribe to the Healthier Tech Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Get your free quick start guide to building a healthier relationship with technology and our latest information at healthiertech.co.